Welcome to the You're Not Crazy podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in healing from narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way. You can connect with Jessica and find additional resources, content, and coaching at emotionalabusecoach.com.
Hello, and thank you for being here. Today, I have an episode to share that is part of the Unhooked series. Unhooked is a private podcast available on my website, emotionalabusecoach.com, that is about mapping out your specific cycle of abuse. And today I'm sharing one of the few case studies that I have within that course so that you can understand a bit more about why I'm offering it and what's included. I created Unhooked, mapping out your cycle of abuse for survivors who are trying to make sense of what actually happened in their relationship and how to break free from the trauma bond. And so in this episode, our specific cycle of abuse, I walk you through what this cycle actually looked like, not the textbook version, but the lived experience. These are moments that were quiet, they were confusing, they were designed to keep me small, and if you ever felt like you're the one going in circles, or like peace is just always out of reach, but the calm isn't calm, this one is for you. And if this really resonates with you, I invite you to check out Unhooked, the private feed. The link is in my show notes. You can get access to the full series. As always, if you're looking for support, you can find me on Instagram at emotionalabusecoach, at emotionalabusecoach.com, and at high-conflictdivorcecoaching.com. This is another case study of the cycle of abuse, and this is one through my lived experience. And my goal in sharing this is because this cycle wasn't overtly abusive, but it was very covert, coercive, and rooted in emotional chaos. And so if you are with somebody who might have signs of BPD or narcissism and borderline, this is probably going to feel very eye-opening for you. It did not start with yelling. It didn't start with him being cruel. It started with me feeling very confused. He never shouted. He didn't throw things. And he didn't raise his voice, really. What he did was far more disorienting, which was he blurred the line between love and control until I really couldn't tell the difference anymore. The cycle of abuse in our relationship didn't look like a typical storm. And I've had one where there were things being thrown and things slammed, and I felt scared. This one was a lot of silence, guilt, long messages disguised as accountability, and me trying to decode the tone of a man who insisted he loved me while slowly eroding my reality. And so he didn't explode, but he would give me the silent treatment purposefully. He even called it once a pregnant pause, which basically said, I'm giving you the silent treatment hoping that you're going to change your perspective. He didn't threaten me, but he twisted words and reality and applied tone to text. And he blamed me incessantly. He blamed me for my own perspective. And so tensions rising was emotional tension. It was very subtle, and it showed up in the way he would go cold when I didn't respond the way he wanted. So he would come up with the reasons and how he wanted me to respond to him. He'd send message after message when I was in a meeting or taking care of my kid, needing me to stop what I was doing and reassure him, which I didn't do that often and would get in trouble for it. It wasn't about my presence. It was about proximity and control. I could be right there and still be punished for not being, like, quote unquote, with him enough. He would talk about how much he missed me all the time, but it wasn't affection. It was pressure. And it was literally pressure for me to stop what I was doing and meet his needs, which included if he, quote unquote, needed sex. And if I couldn't, and I didn't, or simply said, I need a second, it was seen as rejection. If I responded to a logistical question first, rather than the 17 I love you messages, I was in trouble. And sometimes he'd say things like, I just want to know I matter to you, which sounds loving until you realize it's set into response of me needing to go to the bathroom or breathe or just exist in my own world outside of him for a moment. And then it was the incident, and the incident was always my fault. With the rupture, it was not always yelling at me, but it was always a blow up, an emotional shutdown, and a monologue of how I let him down and how I changed and how he doesn't feel safe with me. He'd say things like, "You're dragging your past into this," if I set a boundary with him. He made compassion feel conditional. If I was sick but not emotionally available for him during it, I was neglectful. If I expressed how I felt, I was accused of viewing him through a trauma lens, even though I was just telling him how I felt. And every time that I did try and speak about my experience, it became about him. If I was in pain or exhausted or just focused on something else, it was framed as me being checked out. Even when I was helping him, even when I was showing up, if it's like, I can't even tell you what he wanted me to do instead, but I know that when I even did show up, it was never enough. He made it so my needs were always one step too far from what he could tolerate. And then what came after that wasn't reconciliation. It was more of a punishment disguised as self-protection. But sometimes it looked like disappearing after I said something emotionally triggering for him, which usually sounded something like, "I'm not saying this to do da." And then he would just lose his shit. Sometimes it was a monologue about how he needed a second at how much he loves me and he just wishes I could see that. I would try to take space and connect. I wanted it to stop. I didn't want to be misunderstood. So I would kind of fall into a bit of over explaining. And every time it would end with him realizing that he blew up on me over nothing. He was sorry. He wasn't going to do it again, and some new language. And then after that came the calm. When he'd reappear, it would seem gentle, thoughtful. "I just miss you. You're my person. I don't want to fight. Let's try again." He'd promise some insight. He would tell me about like a growth moment he had. And in that moment, I believed it. And it wasn't because I was naive, but it was because I needed the chaos to make sense to me. And I was trauma bonded. I knew it. I felt it in my body. I was trying to create space from it at this time because this wasn't my first rodeo. But my nervous system had been so trained to find relief in like these little breadcrumbs of the person that I thought he was. And I wasn't becoming addicted to him, but addicted to the moment when he came back and apologized, because it gave me a hit of what I thought of as hope. Of like, if this person keeps having this self-awareness, even though I wasn't recognizing how many times it would just fall away, or it would really get to me, because he would also talk a lot about my own trauma that he wasn't there to live, but would talk about how I just don't want to accept love. And that's not true. He made me think that I had to earn love, and that the problem was my trauma, my needs, my boundaries. And he framed his love as the only version of love as I should accept. He literally said to me once, "I want you to see my love is beautiful." And I'm like, well, I see it as suffocating. It made me uncomfortable, but he made his abandonment of my needs my fault. And every time I stepped away to protect myself, he'd come back with a new script, making me question if I was the one being too harsh. I was never allowed to say this doesn't feel good without being accused of ruining something so sacred. And what helped me break this cycle was naming it. I stopped calling it miscommunication, and I started calling it what it was: emotional withholding, gaslighting, Darvo, love bombing with no follow through. I stopped trying to understand him, because love doesn't require this much justification. And I did not feel like I could be myself anymore. And he was okay with that. It was almost like he wanted me to lose that. And I wasn't okay with that. The cycle of abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it does come with long texts and silence and shutdowns and a slow erosion of your reality. And if you feel like you're constantly trying to prove that you care, to earn someone's love, to explain your way out of being misunderstood, pause, because it may be something else entirely. And so I hope this case study was helpful in seeing a different side of the cycle of abuse. If this episode is something you've lived through but couldn't name, I invite you to go deeper inside Unhooked, Mapping the Cycle of Abuse. This is a private podcast series where we break down each phase of the abuse cycle, explore trauma bond in depth, and help you reclaim your clarity, your nervous system, and your sense of self. You're not too sensitive. You're not imagining it. You're mapping the cycle. You can go to my website, emotionalabusecoach.com, and click on Unhooked, or use the link below.